Tacoma.
Tacoma.
Today we have first grade, second grade, and fifth grade with us.
Hello,
Hi,
everybody.
friends. We are going to do something fun today.
Yes, we are.
But before we begin,
And we're going to be calm about it.
because we don't want to yell in Mr. Kevin's ears, we need to check in with our zones.
Yes, let's do that.
Check in with your zone. How are you feeling today? What's your body feeling like? What emotions are you having? How does your brain feel? What are your thoughts feeling like? Mr. Kevin, what zone are you in today?
Well, let's see. I think that I'm in the green-yellow zone. How's that? The green-yellow zone,
It
teachers.
happens.
You can be in
Yeah.
more than one zone at a time.
You can
Yeah.
because your body can be in one zone, your brain can be in another, and your emotions can be in another.
Yeah.
Ay, ay, ay.
Yeah. How about you, teachers? What zones are you in?
I also am in the green-yellow zone. I'm in the yellow zone because I'm a little bit anxious. I have an appointment and I keep forgetting about it. But luckily, my friend Mrs. Wally has agreed to help remind me that I need to go to my appointment. Otherwise, I'm green and good to go.
I told her I'm not going to let her leave without reminding her.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
How are you feeling?
I'm in the green zone.
That's awesome.
A little bit blue, but my tongue is starting to feel better.
Oh, that's good.
So I have this inflamed taste bud on the end of my tongue, right where you like pronounce all the letters, and it was really hurting earlier today and was really hard to talk. It's starting to get better.
Oh, that's
but if
good.
my words sound funny, that's why.
That's why. That's okay.
Before we talk about where we're going today,
Okay. Three personal standards.
Really important today.
Especially because we're going out into public.
We're going on a field trip.
Going on a field trip.
So let's review them.
Okay.
Show respect,
make good decisions, solve problems. So when we go on a field trip, we show respect by,
Leaving it better than the way we found it.
oh, I like that motto.
Taught that since I was really little.
Yeah.
Means if we're going to look at something and explore it, we put it back. We don't disturb it. We are going out into nature. We want to be respectful of the animals, give them their space, so that we can enjoy watching them.
We're going to be respectful of the plants by staying on the path.
Yeah, we don't want to like go up and like trample on all of the plants and kill them. That would not be good because then that would affect the animals and the salmon and the watershed, and it would not be a good thing.
And we need to have calm bodies too,
Yes.
so that the animals don't pick up on a high energy vibe and it makes them scared or want to act differently than they would
Right.
if we weren't there.
Because we want to see what they look like in nature, and then solve problems.
Yeah, as always. Okay. Are you ready to hear where we're going?
I can't wait.
We are going to.
The Tacoma Nature Center.
I did not know this existed, so I am so excited to go.
Yes,
And we're going to meet Michelle there.
we are.
She is going to give us so much information.
She knows a lot.
She knows so much. We're going to explore Snake Lake.
She's going to talk to us about the native plants and animals that live around here, that live in that ecosystem. And she's going to explain why it's important for even animals and other habitats for us to keep native species here.
And why the watershed of Snake Lake is important to the other water systems and the salmon in the Salish
Salmon.
Sea.
We found a connection.
Yay!
So let's review
Our
our
three
essential questions.
essential questions. Which one is yours? See if you can remember.
yeah. How do plants and animals use their structures and elements to survive?
How do plants and animals work together to survive?
And why are salmon important to the Salish Sea? And this is what part of the Tacoma Nature Center looks like.
It is. And we actually don't go to this part.
We didn't go
when
to
we
this
go.
part.
But this is the park you can play at.
Yeah.
Now, the scientific process.
How does science work?
How does it work? How does this stuff work? And we've lived a lot in this top reddish color. We've been asking questions, we've been reading, we've been gaining knowledge and making observations. We're gonna go make some more observations. Are we gonna stay in that red part today, Miss Allison, or are we going down into the green?
You know what? We're going to gather a lot of data today.
We are.
And a lot of information. That's in the green zone.
Okay, so we're going down into that green
And
zone.
we're going to interpret some of our observations. So we're going to say, I noticed this, it must mean this.
Or I noticed this, so I wonder
Oh, and that'll put us right back up into the red.
Yeah, it's so cool how the scientific process, you kind of go in between all these different things to learn and understand how the world works.
So,
Okay, did you want to show them that really cool
yes.
video? Now, there's something that's going to happen. It's not up yet. Let's see. You need to
Every time I need to
Duplicate.
change my
Dun, dun, dun.
projection.
There we go.
Okay.
At the end of our field trip, you're going to learn how you can be a part of this project. Now, there's no sound, but you're just going to watch. What do you notice? I don't know if we need to watch the whole thing. Ms. Austin.
No. So this seems to be scenes from,
The same spot.
does it look the same?
No, and I'm noticing years.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wonder if you could drag that dot.
Could
Can you
I?
drag it? Whoa.
There you go.
Keep dragging it. Go a little bit slower. Look at that. This is a really cool project. They have this little sign there, and you put your phone on it. And everyone's phone goes in the same spot, and you take a picture, and then you can email it to them, and they add it to this time lapse. And this is the same spot there at the Nature Center over years and years and years of time, and how it's changed and developed.
It's amazing.
Pretty amazing. So at the end of our field trip, you're going to learn
there's snow.
how to do that. Oh, look at that. You're going to learn how you can take a picture and be part of this project.
You can be a community scientist.
Oh my goodness. We're going to learn how to be community scientists.
Yes.
And you're also going to learn that if you go there, you might bump into Mrs. Wally or Miss Oslin, because we are taking our families back there.
We'd love to see you there.
I'm going to go there all the time.
All right.
It's beautiful. All right, friends, next time you see us, we will be at
The
the
Nature Center.
Bye.
Hi, Tacoma. We are here at the Tacoma Nature Center and Snake Lake, and we are going to have the opportunity to look around and notice, make observations about all of the things that we see and that we think that are connected to the lessons that we've been learning. We've been talking about biodiversity, which is
Nature.
nope, that's biomimicry. Oh, we always get these mixed up.
Biodiversity
Biodiversity is variety of life in the world. Woo. I think we need to try that again.
Yeah.
Biodiversity, biodiversity, the variety of life in the world. Biomimicry is when two or more things copy each other. And we've been learning about salmon and how the salmon are so important to the Salish Sea.
Yes.
And we've been talking about interdependence, when two or more things need each other. So we're going to introduce you to our expert from the Tacoma Nature Center. And Michelle is going to tell us all about what we can do here at the Nature Center as visitors. And we're going to go on a tour. And we're going to get to see the lake, or the bridge that goes over the pond where we saw that really neat time-lapse video. Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for coming today. I'm so excited to share the Tacoma Nature Center and Snake Lake with you. There's a lot to do in the park, even though the building itself is closed. Right now, we're giving you a little sneak peek at what's in the building. So when we reopen, hopefully in September, you can come visit us in here too. So you're seeing the exhibits part of the Nature Center, and we focus here on three kind of areas of nature. One is urban wildlife. We call them city critters. Animals that are found commonly in urban environments like the Tacoma Nature Center, and sometimes in people's backyards too. We also focus on watersheds, which is basically all the water that would drain into an area. We're in the Chambers Clover Creek watershed right here, and if you go for a walk on the trail, you can actually learn more about the watersheds in the area. And the third topic that we focus on is wetlands and wetland habitats. So what you're seeing here today is kind of a typical Washington wetland habitat. You can't find all these creatures here at Snake Lake because we're right in the middle of the city, but in a typical wetland in Washington State, you might find some of these creatures. And I'll kind of point them out as we go through. It's still a little chilly outside, so not all the creatures would have been visible if you go for a walk. But an example of some animals that you might find here at Snake Lake is aquatic turtles. And if you pan right down in there, you'll be able to see an aquatic turtle, actually 2 of them, sunning themselves. There's actually a heat lamp under or in the log on top. That's why it's out on the log, getting some nice warmth. So out in Snake Lake, you might see turtles on logs getting the actual sun, but it's still a little early in the year to see turtles outside.
Just like when we categorized, this is a cold-blooded animal that has an internal skeleton, doesn't it? Yes, it does.
It does. And in fact, a lot of people think, because they've seen it on TV, cartoons, things like that, that a turtle can leave its shell. It cannot. And in a minute, I can actually show you a turtle shell with the backbone built right in, and you can see there's no way they could leave their shell. Yeah. So if you ever find a shell with no turtle, that means it's passed away. It's not alive anymore. So we have turtles here at Snake Lake. If we walk around the other side here, you can see, go ahead, we'll meet you over there on the other side. You can see another turtle that might be found in a Washington wetland, right over here. This is Ponderosa. She is a western pond turtle. And this is actually an endangered species, so it's really neat to be able to see one in captivity here. She is not able to be released into the wild, but western pond turtles used to be more numerous in Washington wetlands and no longer so much.
How is the western pond turtle different from the other 2 turtles?
So they're totally different species, but what you can see by visually looking, so you can see what you're looking at, is you notice her stripes on her face don't have any color at all. And the painted turtles have a little bit more color to their shells as well as their faces. And then another kind of turtle that is actually more common is the red-eared slider. Unfortunately, that's a non-native turtle. It's the kind that you can buy in pet stores and a lot of it get released. So the main way is kind of looking at the faces.
Okay.
Also, sometimes in Washington wetlands, you'll find other turtles that aren't native at all, and I don't even know what they are because there could be many, many different kinds. But the 3 most common ones in Washington are those.
And did you say that sometimes the species that are not native, they get released?
Yes, unfortunately, people think, oh, I can't keep my turtle anymore. It's a pain to take care of. There's a lot of work involved. Oh, I'll just take it to a wetland and release it, which is really unfair to that animal because it's not used to surviving in the wild. But even more importantly for the habitat, there's already animals in that habitat, and when you bring something in that's not native to that area, it could displace the native animals and compete with them, outcompete for food. And what we've seen with the red-eared sliders, for example, is they're much more competitive for food. So they kind of push out the native painted turtles and outcompete them. So it's kind of a sad situation. So if you ever take on a pet, you should always treat that pet as it's yours for life or find another good home, but don't ever release them into the wild. We see a lot of rabbits, too, get released.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Some of the other animals in here are not as easy to see. I don't know if we're going to be able to see we have a Pacific chorus frog in here, and I'll take a look. It looks like he's hiding right now. But if you hear frogs out in the wild making a lot of noise, it's probably a Pacific chorus frog, or often called a Pacific tree frog. They're just little frogs. And do you see him back there? Maybe you can get the camera up and over. I'll move the light, and then you can come out from that side.
Okay, let's see. Probably a lot of reflection here on the case, but he's in the corner.
I think so. He's a little camera shy. He actually came to live with us since we shut down, so he's not used to visitors. In the past, we've had frogs in these tanks, and they kind of got used to the visitors coming and going. We do have a western toad over here, and he looks like he's visible. Yeah.
Turtle.
That's a non-native turtle. We use him for education. He's only living here because we're closed.
Okay.
Usually he's behind the scenes. So down here is a western toad, which is another animal that is found in western Washington wetlands. And western toads are a wonderful species that not everybody gets to see. And not everybody knows the difference between toads and frogs either. Typically, a toad would be bigger than our little native frogs. But they also have a couple other physical differences. So I challenge you to look up the difference between toads and frogs online, and maybe you can share it with somebody as you learn more about that.
I'm very curious about that.
You know, it's funny. You said there was a toad in there, and I was looking, and I was like, I don't see the toad. And then I realized that was not a bump on the log.
Yes.
That was the toad.
What toads and frogs definitely do have in common is that they both eat insects and things like worms. So we feed our toads and frogs here crickets and mealworms and night crawlers. So in captivity, they kind of the same stuff they'd eat in nature, but we make it easier for them here. So.
Some of our students have learned about frogs and toads, and they croak for different reasons. Like
Yes.
some croak to attract a mate, some croak to communicate.
It's really interesting. We've been kind of talking about animal sounds. We learned the same thing about whales. Some whales only make sound to communicate, and some make sound to locate their food.
And that's a great thing to talk about with animals right now, especially because what you're hearing in nature a lot of is bird calls, right?
So many birds
yes,
right now.
spring is the time that they start to perk up. So normally throughout most of the year, when you hear bird noises, it's bird calls. So alarm calls, there's danger nearby, this is my spot, keep out, whatever. But as we move into the spring breeding season, you're starting to hear a lot more bird songs. And bird songs are usually more complicated, longer. Sometimes they go back and forth between male and female and that kind of thing. And so you'll notice a difference in the sounds that you might normally be seeing. I feed birds in my yard, so I'm used to listening to certain things, and I'm definitely noticing a lot more of the song type stuff. But they'll still do the calls the same too. Like they'll continue, they just do more vocalizations. And that's pretty normal for birds.
We have a hummingbird right now that's in our Japanese maple. We think she has a nest in the rhododendron next to it because she's there all the time and she's making calls constantly. And then when we get close, she'll dive bomb us. So we've just been like staying away from that part of the yard because we don't want to stress her out.
Yes.
Because I think she's got a nest going on in that
And
rhododendron.
you know what's fun to know about hummingbirds is their eggs when they lay them about the size of a Tic Tac.
Yep.
And you know what, right here, if you want to zoom in on this, is an example of a hummingbird nest. So if you want to come up close to that, you can see a nest that might be in something like your rhododendron. It's basically made of items that they find in nature as they weave things together. And hummingbirds use a lot of moss and lichen and spider webs. Spider webs kind of bind everything together. And it's a very soft, fuzzy nest with 2 little Tic Tacs usually in it. They typically lay 2 eggs, depending on the species. But it's the time of year that they might be out there. But usually they're going to be more hidden than this nest. It's going to be harder to see.
Yeah, we haven't looked for it because we think it's inside, and we just don't want to disturb what she has going on, and so. But we might find an empty nest eventually. So.
And this is one of the great reasons why we have places like the Tacoma Nature Center, because what happens is we don't want to disturb the animals in nature because it might make them give up their nest or something. But if you come here, you can see things like an example of a hummingbird nest. You can see a stuffed raccoon or a stuffed porcupine, a stuffed great blue heron. These are all animals that used to be alive. They're not alive anymore, but they are real. And we don't kill anything just to bring it here and stuff it, but when we do come across things like this that we're able to share, it's a great way to have people be able to see it without disturbing. Another great nest that I love is the one hanging up there. It looks like just a ball of nothing, but it's a bush tit nest, and they make hanging pendulous nests. And if you ever see something like that in a bush after the season, it's pretty interesting to think about them weaving that whole thing together. Oh, wow. Bush tits are a very solitary little, or a very social little bird that come in big flocks. And so on my feeders, when they come, they kind of descend on it like this big flock of bush tits. But when they're nesting, of course, it's just a pair that does that. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the things that you can see when you come inside the Tacoma Nature Center when we reopen. Right now, you can only walk through the park, but we can take you on that walk in just a minute. I want to take you in to see the turtle shell, and then we can do some other things.
Yeah, that's great. Now we're in a side classroom here in the Nature Center, and as Michelle talked about, turtles cannot actually leave their shells. And she mentioned that they have a turtle shell here, and it looks smooth, and I'm noticing the coloring is probably good for camouflage.
On the inside, you can see where the spine is.
Pretty cool. Yeah, turtle shells are made out of keratin. You can tap on it. You can see it's hard. It's the same stuff in our nails and fingernails. And so keratin is what makes up the shell, the upper part being called the carapace, C-A-R-A-P-A-C-E, and the underside being the plastron, P-L-A-S-T-R-O-N.
That's like armor.
Yeah, it has to be. And so a turtle can pull their body parts into their shell if they're needing to protect themselves. And here's another example of a turtle shell. This turtle, neither of these turtles are alive anymore, but you can see the spine's built right in. Check yourself. Do you have a spine?
I do.
Yep, good thing. We'd have a problem if we didn't. So just like us, they cannot leave their spine behind. So when you see a turtle shell without spine, you can realize, yes, turtles cannot leave their shell. So now you've learned something new maybe that you thought was different.
Yeah. Amazing. It's a beautiful view out this window.
Yeah. This is part of the Tacoma Nature Center. This is the start of the lake. We're going to take a little walk out there, and this is accessible to the public to go on these walks. Snake Lake is a seasonal wetland of sorts. There's always water here, and in fact, that's the definition of a wetland habitat, is land that is wet at least part of the year. But because it drains from the area around, it's a watershed drainage area. Sometimes there's more water than others. And so on really high rain events, we've actually seen water come up to those steps where it's kind of getting close, and we start to think, oh, should we abandon the building? But it's never actually flooded up here. We've been lucky. And other times in the summer, for example, you might look out where that grassy area is and there's no water at all. It just looks like, kind of some grasses. So seasonal wetlands are very important to wildlife, though, because these are the places where they will find shelter, food. Sometimes they raise their young. And Snake Lake is a great example of an urban wetland where things like ducks will come and build their nests. Lots of birds will come in here and breed. And much like any wetland in Washington that's not like tidal or part of the ocean, they change over time. So not only do they change throughout the year based on how much water is here and the plants having leaves or not, but there's a process called succession. And I'm not sure if you talked about that with your students yet, but succession is basically the process of habitats changing over time. And specifically with wetlands, what happens is, unless there's a whole lot of water that's constantly scouring things out and knocking down trees and plants and pushing out the gravel and stuff, it's going to gradually fill in. Just like if you washed off your boots in your bathtub every day, eventually all that dirt and mud would fill up the bathtub with dirt and mud and there'd be no room for water, right? So in a wetland like this, over time it's going to change from more of a lake to a marsh, is what some people would call it. And if you look at pictures, old-timey pictures from this area, Snake Lake was much more of a lake back when it was first named. That's why it was called Snake Lake. And it's called that because it's a long, skinny shape, much like a snake if you view it from overhead. But now when you look at it, you think, this is not a lake, this is a marsh. And that's exactly why that project that's so taking those snapshots over time is so interesting, because we can kind of see that process in much faster time than you're actually going to see too much change. But over 100 years, this place has become much more like a marsh than a lake. And there's some pictures on our website that you can look at that show from the air what this lake looked like back in the 1930s, which is pretty cool.
So as the lake has changed, is it fair to assume that there are different animals?
That's a great question, yes. One small example is when I first started coming here to this park, started working here in 2005, there were a lot more wood ducks here, which is a popular bird because they're so beautiful. And a lot of people would come here to look at the wood ducks. They've been coming for years and decades. But when I came here, we would only see them occasionally, and even now, it's very rare that we see wood ducks. They just need more open water than what we have here. So that's one specific example I can tell you about. Other ones might be, there also used to be swans that would come more often, and geese, but we don't see those as much either because they, again, want more open water. But we've seen some increases in things like, for example, swallows that eat bugs, flying insects. You might see more of those as there's more kind of places for the bugs to be, hatching and raising. So I don't have a lot of specific answers on what has changed here at the Nature Center, but absolutely as habitat changes, the wildlife that uses it will change as well. And usually the process is slow enough that wildlife has time to adapt. What happens when humans come in and change things too quickly is a real problem, because then humans change it and the animals don't have time to adapt. All of a sudden their habitat's just gone or no longer usable. And that's why it's really good to think about how you're doing things when you make big changes. We do a lot of work here at the Tacoma Nature Center of invasive plant removal. Things like English ivy and Himalayan blackberry are not native to this area. And so we try and get those out of here as best we can with the limited abilities that we have, time-wise and people-wise. But it's very important to realize that even though it's a bad thing, we can't take it all out at once, because that was habitat that was getting used somewhat by animals. And if you remove it very quickly, then there's no cover there, and also erosion will pick up. Have you talked about erosion yet?
No.
Erosion is a process where land gets washed away by water. So if you imagine a hillside with plants all over it, it's not going to get washed, the dirt won't get washed away as fast, right? Because the plants are kind of holding it on with their roots and that kind of thing. If you take a whole patch of ivy off the hillside, and then it rains, more dirt will get washed down. And so we don't want to have erosion happen because we're removing an invasive plant. So we go through a process of making sure that it's purposeful. And one of the reasons I bring it up is because we do have regular work parties where people can help with those stewardship projects, where they can help remove invasives and sometimes even plant other things, because when you take out the old invasive stuff, you want to put in good native stuff. So our website does have that information if people want to help out, including kids.
Yeah. So we're also learning about salmon and how making sure that we have native plants can help support our salmon or other animals, even if the salmon aren't living here.
Thank you. We don't do as much salmon education here because this is not a salmon wetland. It's a freshwater lake, but you can't get up into it from the bottom where salmon would come in. But yes, it's very important because this water flows down into salmon habitat. So if it's unhealthy water coming from here, it's going to be unhealthy water down in their habitat. And certainly having the right plants to stop erosion and to help filter out pollutants and stuff does ultimately help salmon. So even if it's not a salmon-bearing stream, having good native habitat will definitely help the salmon downstream and out in the saltwater.
Interdependence.
Interdependence, when two or more things need each other.
And that's why the watershed concept is so important to understand, because what happens upstream or on a hill or even anywhere in the city of Tacoma will ultimately affect the salmon, because everything drains into that area from this watershed.
As we continue to say, it's all connected.
It very is connected.
It reminds me of Finding Nemo when they say all water leads to the ocean.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
All right, should we go outside?
Yes, let's go outside.
Okay.
As we were walking outside the Tacoma Nature Center, we saw this beautiful mosaic. Michelle, can you tell us more about it?
Yes, first of all, I'll say that this is one of the biggest features of the park that a lot of people like to come and take a picture of. So even though the building is not open right now, you can certainly come up and touch it and get a sense of it and take pictures with it. It's a great place to kind of show that you were here, because obviously you are here. This mosaic was designed by a local mosaic artist, Mauricio Robolino. And he had a great relationship with the Nature Center, partly because his kids came here when they were younger for camps and such. But he designs mosaics like this that the kids then put together. So this was built by kids during one of our summer camps. Wow. And he just basically guided them on how they would best do that. There's another one inside the building when we reopen of salmon, and you'd be welcome to see that when you have a chance. So feel free to come up and touch it. If you want to see more of his work, you can go to his website. But there's a new one that just went up at the Eastside Community Center that was his work as well. I believe that's where it was. Might have to check. So anyway, please come and see our mosaic.
Right outside the door of the Nature Center is this kiosk, and we have both an A-frame sign and a map that Michelle is going to tell us what it tells us.
So this is a great way to start your visit to the Tacoma Nature Center and Snake Lake, because you can see where you're going to walk. And I always recommend having an idea of where you're going. So come out of the parking lot, out of your car, come over here and take a look at the map. Snake Lake, as you can see, is a long, skinny lake that's shaped like a snake. All this open blue water, of course, we just talked about. We're not going to see open blue water so much, but it gives you an idea of what the lake looks like with plants all along it. There's about 2.5 miles of trails that you can visit here in the park, and you can choose which one you want. You can always change your mind when you're out there too, because at each intersection is a sign like this showing you where you are at that point. So it's a great way to start out. Just a couple rules to follow when you're out there, including no pets, no bicycles, no smoking, those kind of general things that you don't allow in most parks. Although dogs can be at other parks. We're a nature preserve, which means that we try and protect things to be as close to normal and natural as possible. And if you bring dogs, which are predators, into an environment like this, it affects how the wildlife might behave. Even if the dog is a sweet dog that would never attack a raccoon, the raccoon doesn't know it. It smells a predator, and it may change its behavior. And we want to see the raccoons, so we want them to feel safe coming down to the water and stuff. So that's why we have a no-dog rule.
So they smell us too, don't they?
They do. However, humans Unless they've had bad interactions with humans, they don't tend to see us as a predator, maybe just a disturbing thing. So if an animal lives here all its life and it has interactions with humans that are fairly positive, it's not going to fear humans. It probably won't come up to you because it knows it's, potentially dangerous, but they're not going to run and hide per se. So that's one of the reasons we like to tell people, observe from a distance and you'll see more natural behaviors. If you approach something, it will be afraid of you potentially. We don't want all of our wildlife running from us every time it's seen. So another thing you can do while you're here at the park on your own, no matter what time or day you come, is a program called Agents of Discovery. And you can find all of this on our website. We have, if you cross a scavenger hunt or treasure hunt with Pokemon Go, that's what Agents of Discovery is. You play it on your mobile device. It's free to download the app. And once you have it on and you've loaded the mission on, you don't need Wi-Fi. So you can do that at home and then come here and do it. You have to be here to play it. And it takes you out on the trail and you learn as you go. We're very lucky here at the Nature Center. We have different missions throughout the year. So starting April 1st, we'll have our special Earth Day mission. And this is the Earth Day mission's avatar, a beautiful hummingbird. But we're just finishing up the Wake Up to Winter mission, which will go until the end of March. And then in May, we'll start another mission. So you can do up to 5 missions here, depending on what time of year you come. And then at Titlow Park and Wright Park, there are other missions as well. And then throughout the Puget Sound, there's other missions. And in fact, if you wanted to do this in the summer, we're having the Puget Sound Explorers campaign, which means that all the partners who have missions like this, including Pierce County Parks, some Washington State Parks and others, will all have their missions. And you go out and you can learn and enjoy and exploring those different areas. And there's going to be some special prizes awarded during that Puget Sound Explorers campaign. So I definitely recommend doing this. Trying it out, see if you like it. Most kids do enjoy it.
And is that free?
Everything's free.
Wow.
So you just download the app on your phone from your Play Store, and then you have to download the mission, each mission individually. So if you know you're coming to a park, you would download that mission ahead of time. Then you don't need Wi-Fi at all. So it's a great way. So you don't have to use your data up. So there's really no cost to people as long as they have a smart device.
Nice. I'm also noticing behind you, there's the Take a Walk sign.
Yes.
And labels here. We talked with our first and second graders about classifying plants and animals. And there's a list of native plants, and then mammals, amphibians, birds, and invertebrates. And these are all plants and animals that we could see here at the Nature Center.
Yes, this is a partial list, and I'm just going to point out that it's amphibians and reptiles.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Which are different groups of animals, but they're often classed close, so that's good. And then there's a complete list of all the ones we think you might see on our website under the trail, so you can download a trail guide. It's a paper guide, so you may just want to take a look at it. But that will have a complete list, which is about, I'd say 4 times longer than this list on there.
Wow.
But these are the most common ones. Yeah. It also talks a little bit about the history of the Nature Center here. This has been a park for quite a while. The building itself was put in 1992, but it became a nature preserve back in the earlier part of the year in 1979. And there's been a natural area here longer than that. So we just recently celebrated our 40th anniversary. I think this year is 42, time flies. And we were able to have a whole bunch of highlights from the history of the Nature Center that we pulled together for the 40th anniversary celebration. And those are still on the website. If you want to learn more about the history of the Nature Center, there's highlights from the last 40 years on there.
Wonderful. Where should we go next?
Let's go down the trail and take a look at that first bridge.
Awesome.
We have a beautiful woodpecker using this beautiful black cottonwood tree as a source of food. It's looking for insects to eat. Woodpeckers don't always pound on the trees to get their food. Sometimes they'll just look for it and go up and down the trees. They're also looking for signs of insects where they might decide to pound into it to get it. I believe, I couldn't quite tell, I believe that's a female. It didn't have any red on the back of its head. If it was a male, then it would just have a red patch on the back of its head. So this black cottonwood is an example of a deciduous tree, meaning that it does lose its leaves in the wintertime. So right now, when you look out into Snake Lake, you'll see a whole lot of deciduous trees. A big percentage of wetland plants in this area are deciduous. They lose their leaves. So you've got willows, you've got cottonwoods, you've got alders, a bunch of different types of trees and shrubs like that. This is an important time of year for animals to be able to find food because it's harder. But without these leaves on the trees, it's sometimes a little bit easier for these birds like woodpeckers and chickadees to find insects because they don't have to fight their way through all the leaves. And it is a great chance for the trees to protect themselves from the colder weather. That's why they lose their leaves. They don't have to keep them from being frozen. But when you look at an evergreen tree like this cedar over here, those trees do keep their needles year round. And conifers and evergreens are in that group of plants that do keep their leaves year round. And the needles are very tough. I don't know if you want to get a close-up of the needles, but needles are very tough, and that's why they can stand being out throughout the winter. And in the understory, after we look at the cedar needles, you're going to see the evergreen sword ferns. They stay out throughout the year as well. And if you were to touch an evergreen fern like this one, you'll see it's very tough and leathery. It's not soft and feathery like some of the other ferns that are deciduous. So sword ferns are out year-round. They will grow new leaves in the spring, and we might even be able to see some starting to come up. Still a little early, but it'll come up right from the center. So you can see when you look at something like the sword fern, the older leaves are down below. They're old and brown. Good look behind you as well. There's kind of a whole hillside here.
Oh yeah, you can see all of them.
Yeah, so all these dead leaves are from previous years, and then the evergreen tough ones that are still here from last year, and then new leaves will come up in the middle. Just a little tip, if you have sword ferns in your yard and you don't like all this messy stuff underneath, we recommend you don't cut that out, or at least leave some of it, because it makes great hiding cover for things like frogs and chipmunks. If you remove all the understory, there's nowhere for them to hide, especially in this time of year when there's not much, with leaves. So in the wild, of course, we don't trim back anything. And you might notice that some of these sword ferns don't have a tip on them. They typically are pointed. I'm going to see if I can find one that is pointed. Here's what it should look like. So it comes to a point at the end on these sword ferns. But if you find them with the point gone, there's another one down here and a couple more. It might be that they got nipped off by a deer. The tips are sweeter and more tender, so a deer might come through and browse on that. And we do have deer right here at Snake Lake. It's always amazing because we're right in the middle of the city. We're surrounded by streets and stuff, but deer do use the park.
So would these ferns be classified as vascular plants?
Yes.
Or non-vascular?
Yeah.
Okay. And then did I also see some spores underneath?
So yeah, the spores are a good eye. Let's see, I don't see if they all have them. Ferns do reproduce by using spores. It's kind of like a version of seeds. And if you look on the bottom of a fern, they don't have them this time of year typically. I'm just trying, oh, here we go. They look like dots, and each dot is a pile of spores. So if you were to look at this with a microscope, each dot would have lots and lots of tiny dots in it. Those are the spores. You're looking at a spore patch, not actual spores.
Okay.
That's cool.
How do those spores then get spread so that the plant can reproduce?
As they dry up, they kind of pop off because then they kind of come loose. And they can sometimes, depending on the fern, get pollinated by wind, which is a big pollinator. They could also get carried on the coats of animals or in birds as they're rustling around in there. Sometimes depends on the kind of fern or spore. Sometimes they're eaten and they are pooped out. But mostly it's wind and water that spread spores for ferns, or just dropping. Gravity works. That's why you will see a bunch of sword ferns together. They've all kind of grown from each other. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And if you like sword ferns, you can get them at native plant nurseries and plant them in your own yard too. They grow well here, obviously. If
We
you
have
ever,
them in our yard.
yeah. If you ever plant a native plant, though, just know that you're still going to have to water it the first couple years. You got to help it get established, and then you don't have to water it much. Another bird that you will find in wetlands and forests in Tacoma area and beyond is the Steller's jay. And I love the Steller's jay because of the beautiful blue color, but also it has a big black mohawk, which is totally cool. And it's very loud, although this one's being quiet right now. They kind of make a very distinctive loud call. If you Google Steller's jay call, you can hear it on the internet. Steller's jays are in the crow family, so they actually are generalists. They can eat pretty much anything. And they're also pretty smart. Most animals, or most birds in the crow family, are very intelligent. Crows, ravens, jays, magpies.
Oh my goodness.
A great example of changing habitat. Black cottonwoods are actually have a very distinctive lifespan to them. They don't live very long, and they rot from the inside. So usually when we get a report of a tree down here at the park, it's usually an old cottonwood that has broken apart and fallen apart. They're important to the habitat, though, because as you saw, the woodpeckers are getting things to eat out of them. The nutrients get recycled back into the soil. And sometimes before they rot away completely, they make good nesting sites for things like owls and even ducks. There's some kinds of ducks, wood ducks, that nest inside cavities in trees. The wood ducks can't make their own nests, though, because their bill doesn't allow them to drill in. So they'll use old owl or woodpecker cavities. Or a little later on, we'll see some human-made nest boxes. Wood ducks and other cavity nesters actually are really well adapted to using human-made boxes. So if you have a shortage of big old trees in an area, you can increase habitat by building nest boxes. The important thing is you want to have the right nest box for the right species, because they all have specific requirements down to the size of the hole that they go into. If it's too big of a hole, then predators can go in. So if you're ever interested in giving homes to the wildlife you have in your yard, figure out what you have and then get the right sized ones for that. The internet is fabulous. You can find all this information on there.
There's some ducks. What kind of ducks are those?
Those are mallards.
And is that a pair?
Yes. Many ducks have what we call sexual dimorphism, where the male and female look different. Some ducks, the male and female look the same. But you've seen a great example of the... I think there's more ducks and turtles out on the log. Let's let these guys go in the water and then we'll walk out there. This is what's called the first bridge. And if you do this loop, it's only half a mile. So pretty much anybody can do it. It's pretty flat. About another half mile added to the loop, there's a second bridge down by Highway 16. So if you keep going straight here, you'll go down to the second bridge. This is our first bridge.
Notice, friends, we're doing one of those personal standards of being respectful of the ducks. We're not trying to scare them into the water. We're just giving them a moment to take their time and get in.
It's so graceful. You'll notice that even though they were different looking in the feathers, they both had orange feet.
Yes, they did.
And that is distinctive on mallards. Some other ducks have orange feet.
They have different looking bills, too.
Yeah, and so if you were to see a male mallard at certain times of the year, he loses his brightly colored plumage and he looks a little bit more like the female.
Oh.
So you would still look for the orange feet. And then there's a spot on their wing called the speculum, which is a blue patch, and I don't know if you can see it on the female. Oh, here comes another one. That's another male, right?
Oh.
I think we just saw territoriality happening.
Yes.
This male mallard probably has a female nearby and didn't want to share the habitat. And so he chased off the other pair.
What a cool thing to witness. It's amazing. Shall we go on the bridge?
Yes, and I'm not too worried about that other pair, by the way. There's other places they can go. I wonder if that's his hen on the log there. I see one at the end of that log. Good job, male mallard. As long as he doesn't chase us off, right?
Yeah. He doesn't seem too bothered by us.
I think he's used to people. Again, because we're not bothering him, so.
Now I'm noticing something different as I look over here at the skyline. I'm seeing it look a little bit different past those deciduous trees.
Yes, absolutely. So what you're looking at is a different kind of habitat, and you can see it, you can pan all the way along here, and you'll see a bunch of green evergreen trees. So that's a forest habitat. We're lucky here at the Nature Center, we have two main kinds of habitat, wetland and forest. And right along the edge of the two is a very rich habitat, because whenever you have two kinds of habitats coming together, that edge area has basically twice of everything, right? More variety, more biodiversity.
Yeah.
So we're lucky that we have this kind of edge here. But there is a ridge up that you have to climb up if you were to go up to that part of the park. It's a hillside, and so the tallest trees that you're seeing up there are actually on the top of that ridge.
Okay.
But there's a nice switchback set, so you don't have to like climb straight up. So this is a great trail for doing that.
Wonderful.
So you should explore all types of the habitat. If you do Agents of Discovery, you will just circle the lake. None of the challenges are up on the hillside, but you'll see it as you're walking. Shall we go down to where the sign is, where you saw the time lapse?
Yes.
It's right down here. So this is where you would put your phone to be part of that time-lapse photography. So if you were to come here, you would put your phone, I'm always nervous when I do it because it's right over the lake. You basically put your phone here in this little notch, and you take the picture. And then you upload it to the cloud, and then you're part of the process.
Wow.
And
So
then
our students can come and be part of that time-lapse
Yes,
process.
they can. And then there's another one of these down on the second bridge, so you could do it in both places if you want. That one points this direction. You can't see this bridge from down there, but it gives you a different direction. Now be careful when you do it, because you want to make sure your phone doesn't fall in, but don't cover up your camera either. So if I were to do it, I would hold it very carefully and do this. I've already done it before several times, though, so I'm not going to do it today.
That's amazing.
Yeah, did you guys want to do it? Now, if you do it, it's important that you put your phone in that bracket, because otherwise you're looking at a different spot and then you can't compare it. It's like comparing apples to oranges. They don't look the same. But if you look at that time lapse,
Where to email it?
yeah. And if you want to go and look at the chronologue time-lapse photography outside of the video that you're going to be seeing through school, you just can type in chronologue into your browsing menu, or come to the Nature Center's website and you can go to it from there. So there's other ones here in Tacoma. There's 2 other sites in other parks, and then they're all over the country.
I did not know that existed. I'm so excited to go around and hunt for these spots to take pictures.
So this is what's called community science. What we're trying. So if you want to do anything on amphibian cave masters, you have to go to the site.
All right, friends. Wow. That was amazing, Michelle. Thank you so much. Michelle wants to invite you to do something.
So we took a nice little walk around the wetland, but please do, if you come, go up into the forest and see what that habitat's like. When you walk along the trails, you're going to feel like your feet are making different noises. The forest floor is quieter because of all the needles that have fallen over the years. It's softer, it feels softer to your feet, and it just feels like a different area. And the traffic noises are muffled too, even more, so it's a great thing to do and explore and decide maybe what's different about the habitats, and see if you can even see a difference in the wildlife of what's using the habitats.
And see if you can spot any of the wildlife on our forest habitat input chart for 2nd grade. Okay, friends. Sadly, we have to go, but I know I'm going to come back with my family.
Oh, for sure, coming back.
You never know. You might run into me or Miss Osland here at the Nature Center, so make sure to come visit. And now it's time for our affirmation. And coming to the Nature Center and participating in things like this picture taking and participating in their program for removing invasive species means that you're being a community scientist and you're helping the scientists in the area take care of our nature around us. So our affirmation is, I am a community scientist. Take a deep breath, everyone. I am a community scientist. Bye, Tacoma. Have a great day.
10 seconds to pick your crewmate. 2. A new timer will appear with an exercise for the crewmate you picked. 3. You will get points for each correct crewmate and exercise you choose. 4. You will get bonus points if you find Maui's hook. 5. If you pick the imposter, you will lose all your points. 6. Use your math skills to see how many points you can get. Good luck.